Yes, Bob.
Yeah, okay. No, I mean, I've been very consistent. For the last 2 or 3 years, I've been telling the Tesla fanatics, he's got to get his act together quick because global competition is coming. This Audi e-tron is not a big surprise. We've known it was coming for the last 2.5 years. Mercedes is going to have one. BMW. Porsche is going to have a 4-door sedan with a 300-mile range. General Motors has announced 20 different electric vehicle models. And the thing about all of these is they can all be sold.
Thanks for joining us once again. This is Greg. Our focus today is a continuation of our discussion of Bob Lutz and his anticipation of where Tesla would go over time based on a number of variables, including mismanagement and how competitive large OEMs around the world would be against Tesla's onslaught. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the show, like some better ideas on investing and trading, please join us on Patreon. So I wanted to dive right in today. We're going to cover primarily 3 things. Obviously, the Bob Lutz analysis of where the auto market would be now. The video that I chose was from 6 years ago, and the information presented by the folks from Germany is within the last month. I wanted to note that we'll then sort of move on to, well, what about this whole issue of Tesla stock price bouncing 6% on Friday, and where are we and where are we still headed is also a part of the discussion. So first, let's deal with Bob Lutz. So there's a famous quote that says, when you change your perspective, what you're looking at changes. So I had an opportunity to meet with one of the top executives at VW USA, who had previously been senior at Porsche. And I asked him several questions about the business. And the number one question I asked him, and he has a PhD, is, have you ever done any programming? And he said, nope, I've never done any programming. I deliberately asked him that question because there's an entity called a computer. And if you haven't noticed, the way computers affect our lives, from cell phones to cars to computers, etc., keeps expanding, and now we're in the AI world. So what my objective here in bringing this up is the fact that there's a way in which our computers to some extent are taking over our lives, and it continues to accelerate how it does so. And so having exposure to how and why that is a really important element of having it baked in to your company. So let's start with VW, because VW is one of the most important companies in the world. The reason is that 50% of the GDP of Germany is actually auto and auto parts. So as VW, Daimler, BMW get completely taken apart by the expansion of production by China of electric vehicles, it actually is kind of destroying the EU, because Germany has traditionally been the largest economy inside of the EU and kind of drives the whole machine. So why does that matter? Why is that? Well, kind of what happened is that when Tesla opened its factory in Shanghai, it became sort of a laboratory for what would be handed to all the manufacturers in China to allow them to be more competitive / take over from the Europeans. So if we look at, as we accelerate years past when Tesla opened, more and more of Tesla's manufacturing capabilities and everything it does are being handed over to all the Chinese manufacturers. And so those manufacturers, as they've emerged, have been able to deliver vehicles comparable in performance to all the domestics, but wiping sales out for a bunch of companies like both BMW and VW have China as their largest destination for sales of vehicles. And as China keeps ramping up its production of EVs, it's pretty much destroying that business. And this is one of the big reasons why you heard about VW now having to fire 35,000 people in Germany, because not only are they firing 35,000, but we know that a nice vehicle has 2,000 parts. So now you're going to have suppliers to those companies also having to fire a lot of people. I digress to just point out to you there's a 7-to-1 rule in the world of ICE vehicle production, which means that for every job that you have within an auto factory, let's say, there are 7 jobs that are attached to it within those communities. So it could be the restaurants, it could be the clothiers, it could be the grocery stores. All those businesses rely upon the multiplier effect from these factories. So we already know that Europe is having some problems when it comes to recession, particularly Germany, but my expectation is that recession will grow worse as we have more and more vehicles sold from, the China space. But more importantly, we also have Tesla expand its production in Berlin, and as that expands, you're selling fewer European domestic vehicles. It could be Volvo, it could be any of the makes there, but the general idea is that their sales are dropping and they have to cut jobs to align, themselves better than they have been. And that includes offshoring, a bunch of work because it's cheaper to produce there, therefore they can be more competitive. So Bob Lutz made the point that there's competition arriving from, in particular, VW. Now, at that time, the CEO of VW announced he was going to hire 6,000 programmers and, in essence, beef up their ability to be competitive. He also pointed out that vehicles will be coming out from Ford and from GM and other makes that will be Tesla competitive. Now, how did this work out? The answer is COVID hit. A lot of those companies shut down their chip orders, and even today, years later, they're still battling to regain the volume of chips needed to fully equip their electric vehicles as well as their regular vehicles. So what I could or should say here is that what we're seeing is that we have a situation where as Bob described it, the environment stayed in the same way that things worked under ICE vehicles, there'd be no problem here. Tesla would be wiped out as he predicted, and all the other legacy OEMs would be doing great. The problem, though, is that Elon sits on a gold mine of what's the future of transportation. I won't even say cars, because it's really easy to define a car as what's produced by General Motors or BMW or all these others. The other thing you've probably noticed is that Ford suspended production of its Lightning truck. We also have issues with production going on in China for competitors. So there's a lot of ways in which, in essence, Tesla has sort of grabbed one of the top positions of market share and production. In the US, they are dominant because we can see competitors pulling back while Tesla is increasing sales. When it comes to Europe, the Model Y is still the number one vehicle, not impacted by all the new vehicles that Bob talked about that were going to come from all the major OEMs there. So the question is, what's going on in China? Now, in my mind, China is one of the most interesting, important places for what's going on with EVs. Over the past month, I've spent at least a half hour a day learning about what's going on in China, because I have to say I scratch my head every time I watch another video about what's going on there. Just a couple of three quick highlights. Number one, Shanghai is a ghost town with large numbers of executives that previously were based there from companies around the globe leaving. Housing prices have crashed, and this is just focused on departing international executives, having nothing to do with what are the local people doing. And so that group is really exiting. There's been a lot of shift of production into Vietnam and other places, and China seems determined to sort of ignite some kind of a trade war with the United States, even though the U.S. is the number one destination for goods being produced in China. I have to say I still don't get it, but there must be some greater logic I can't understand here. The other thing that's going on in China is, I want to call it something called the best of breed process. So the Chinese have a thing where when we first started studying it, what we learned was that Tesla was the only vehicle that used car dealers were willing to purchase for resale. They were not willing to do so because there were as many as 50 different brands of EVs being produced by different Chinese companies. It was unclear what the futures might be for those, so they were seeing very rapid declines in the value of those vehicles, while Tesla was enjoying and is enjoying still, good retention of value and an ability to better service their customers. So overall, what's going on right now is that there are a lot of electric vehicle competitors, many of them from China. They're aggressive on pricing, but there's one other fly in the ointment, which is if you have a vehicle that's cheaper, but that vehicle is depreciating faster, there are a lot of consumers in China that are focused on identifying the best brands, i.e. VW or a Porsche or a Mercedes or a Tesla, and choosing to purchase those brands because there's a whole bunch of benefits that come with it. The idea that comes to mind is something called caveat emptor. When Chinese do a purchase, they're very clear on the fact that there's a reason why they've chosen international brands and have not chosen to buy domestic brands. Two examples of this is, I can't tell you the number of videos I've seen where it was stated that the airbags, even on the most expensive EVs from China, did not deploy. Another example of this is the fact that we're starting to see different EV makers not making it in China, shutting down. So the question is, if you have an entity that's fairly young and it's in a difficult marketplaces and others are shutting down, how long are you going to be around? The third issue that pops up is that as even the largest of a BYD or XPeng are out there, they're cycling through new models so rapidly that, for example, in the US, we have a 10-year rule. If you produce a vehicle, you have to maintain parts for those vehicles for 10 years. Well, the Chinese manufacturers, I don't know if they have the 10-year rule, but my general point is spare parts are hard to come by if the company that you're working with goes out of business, both spare parts and where will you repair that vehicle. So these variables are starting to squeeze competitors. So I bring all this up because, yes, Tesla is doing well sales-wise, US and Europe, but surprisingly, in a very difficult sales market of China, Tesla is doing well there as well. So the final section I'd like to cover as we push against the usual amount of time that we have is what's going on with Tesla stock price being up 6% on Friday after a rough drop. As you may recall, we're going to hear from the large institutions in the next couple of trading days in terms of what do the analysts think about the situation with Tesla. The feedback we're getting is the analysts are seeing good reason why Tesla's stock price is justified and has reason to keep rising. I would say that I put maybe on that. I only put maybe on that because the problem is that, you know, the PE ratio of Tesla when it's at 300 or 350 is justifiable because the company is growing that fast, especially when you add in things like the robotics they're doing as well as their energy business. But at this price and higher, it's hard to justify that because you just don't have the growth in revenue and earnings to make that work. So if you're in and you're making money here, congratulations. I just want to encourage you to stay hedged because it could get very ugly very, very fast here, with the exception being that we'll know on earnings what new products and services Tesla's offering that will justify this cost. The one I would agree with that I've heard is you could be seeing insider trading where there are certain people who get to find out the future of what Tesla's up to, and they're trading and investing it before the general public gets to do so, and those folks are going to make a killing because they know things everybody else doesn't. I would say I don't think that's the case because it's hard to miss where Tesla's going given everything that's on the table, but it is a possibility. Any rate, so my conclusion today again is the fact that Bob Lutz was saying, yeah, Tesla's pretty much going to go out of business after the large companies around the world start producing electric vehicles. The opposite has occurred. The CEO of VW got fired. They changed the CEO of Daimler. Those companies have pulled back in their EV efforts because they can't get the software to work as well as Tesla does. They're also under pressure because they're losing sales in China and in Europe to the electric vehicles now being built by the Chinese using the blueprints of Tesla. So the truth of the matter is that the Bob Lutz picture defined by how brutal the competition would be from the giant European companies is not happening, and instead Tesla is in the space, whether it's via Chinese partners or direct sales itself, where it's changing the auto business. And if you really look at it, it's really computers changing the auto business, and how Tesla uses those computers to do so is what we're seeing evidence of. So stay tuned. This has been our latest Bob Lutz checkup. The blueprint that Bob helped lay out with his Chevy Bolt and Chevy Volt has been followed by the large OEMs, and it's really not working out. And they need to do some radical changes, I think, in order to stay viable going forward. Once again, this is the end of our vehicle discussion. Let's move on to our health tips. So I spent a lot of time both exercising, working on eating habits, etc., to do a better job relative to health. I would have to say that my biggest sort of training ground of late has been about sugar and its impact on the body, and the fact that high sugar intake is impactful when it comes to cancer. The latest, I don't know if you saw the news on the Surgeon General is warning labels on alcohol relative to cancer is another illustration of how our eating habits can affect short and long-term future and health, and it might be worth your considering that. Also wanted to encourage you to do a 20-minute walk daily, as well as your 25 leg lifts a day with or without weights is a wise way to go. Also been learning to incorporate certain types of stretching. So if, as you get out of bed, you cross your arms and simply raise up and down 3 or 4 times, and same thing to your left and to your right, I think you'll be impressed by stretching impact to the body on a daily basis. And it doesn't have to be very rigorous at all. It just works. At any rate, once again, thanks for joining us. Thanks for indulging us on sound. We continue to want to and work on getting this right, and really appreciate your indulgence. Please join us on Patreon. Happy New Year, and may the New Year bring in great things for you and your family. Tschüss, au revoir, hitro, hoda, affairs, Namaste. Arrivederci. And in Jamaica, we say enough respect, walk good man. Thanks for joining us. Have a good day, and bye for now.
Transition and quick. We are not in good shape at the moment. Companies in Germany are slashing jobs, from car makers like Volkswagen and Ford to steel maker ThyssenKrupp. Thousands of jobs are on the line. So what does this say about the state of Germany and its future? Well, joining me now is Labour economist Nicholas Ziebart from the Leibniz Centre for European Economic Research. Thank you very much for joining us. What do these proposed job cuts tell us about the state of German industry? Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Well, the state of the